Welcome to the Wellness for Women show, where we talk about life, weight loss and everything in between. I'm Faye Caseman, founder of the AAA Way Life and Weight Loss Programme, and I'm here to help you put together the pieces of life and weight loss for one last time. This is an episode of the Wellness for Women show, filmed live in the free Facebook group. Hello, and welcome to a very special bonus episode of the Wellness for Women show. Today, I'm joined by Paula James, movement specialist. And for over 20 years, Paula has been teaching small, gentle movement activities that can open up new possibilities in your life. And today, she's going to let us into a few secrets for pain-free living so you can flourish at any age without drugs or surgery, which sounds absolutely fantastic. So welcome, Paula.
Thank you, Faye. It's lovely to be here with you.
It really is. I'm so excited to have you on. So, of course, everybody listening or watching, because this goes out on podcast and also YouTube and videos as well, I'm sure they would love to know a lot more about you. So how did you get interested and into studying movement? Tell us all about you.
I was always active as a kid, lots of playing in the playground, dance, some martial arts in high school and college, but I was not looking into this field as a career at all. I was a literature major and I played music and I performed as a musician. And so I was on set. I was on track for a life of stories and music. And then I was in an accident. So I was living overseas and it was the end of a long work day. It was a little bit cool and rainy. It was kind of winter time, a little bit drizzly. And the bus came and I was just, it was a good day and I was headed home. And I walked back and chose a seat behind the second doors of the bus because it was up nice and high and I could look out and see everything. But it turned out not to be a very safe spot. It was nice.
Talk about safe spots for anybody. Apologies, something just fell off the wall, mostly due to the cat.
so surprising accidents can happen.
It really is, yeah. So apologies, Paula. Carry on. It wasn't a safe spot.
So there was a metal bar in front of my seats, but there was no vertical plate underneath. And so I was sitting and just looking out, right? It was kind of evening time. The streets were lit by street lights and shop windows and everything was fine until the bus driver stopped suddenly. And I slid off my seat, thankfully under the bar and down those wet, grimy steps. And it sort of all happened for me in that moment. It took me a moment to realize where I was and what had happened. And then I was there at the bottom of the steps and I looked up and I could see the other people look at me and I could see the bus driver look at me in the rearview mirror. Nobody asked if I was all right or if I needed any help. So I was seen and I was also alone. So I got up and when it was my stop, I stepped out into that kind of wet, damp evening and I could feel my muscles sort of seize up and my low back and neck hurt for the next 10 years. And I tried lots of things. I saw doctors and chiropractors and massage people and physical therapists, all sorts. And I still hurt all the time. And I usually stiffened up more in the night. So I woke up more uncomfortable than I was any other time of the day. And late evening after I'd been moving around was usually the best that I got. So then it was sort of hard to go to bed knowing that I would be more uncomfortable in the morning. So then I was dealing with some fatigue too, but it was just, I was fine. And then I was in chronic pain. And I think a lot of folks that I've spoken with that have experiences of these sort of invisible illnesses, right? Like I looked fine to most people. And so then it was easy for them not to realize or give credit to. I can remember my sister years later saying, I had no idea you had 10 years of pain. I was like, yeah, all the time. So it's not something necessarily that you want to lead conversations with, or, when you get asked, how are you today? Well, do I really want to make it all about how I'm having a bad day, or do I want to talk about something else? So there's a lot of kind of masking that goes on. And also people usually don't have much patience for a problem that lasts that long. And so you tend to sort of deflect just so that you can have friendships and social outings that don't center on how you're still having a hard time.
Mm. Yeah, and it is. Yeah, I can see that. Like you say, certainly chronic illnesses, chronic pain. Like you say, and especially one that comes on suddenly. There is quite a bit of adjustment, and there's a lot that then goes into not only the physical but the mental that we'll come on to in a little bit as well.
So
So,
so you asked how I got interested. So while I was in the middle of that long spell, I really set the intention. Well, if I have to go through this, I like
mhm,
to map the territory and learn as much as I can so that when I come out of this, I come out of it able to be useful to other people.
mm,
And it was actually learning how to move differently, how to align my body differently, how to work with my body, how to coordinate my movements differently that took me out of pain. And so I quit my day job, which was teaching high school English,
mhm,
and went off to yoga teacher training because it was yoga that had really shifted me out of pain altogether. And then, very soon after becoming a yoga teacher full time, I started training in the Feldenkrais method because Feldenkrais had also helped quite a bit when I was in those really hard spells. And even though I was out of the big pain with the yoga, right? Like I didn't have pain at rest anymore. I
mhm,
woke up feeling fine. If I was just sitting around, I was fine. I had great yoga poses, but I wasn't very functional for daily life. I couldn't walk very far, like from the parking lot to the yoga studio. And if I went on a hike or a long walk, my left knee would hurt. If I spent too much time on the computer using the mouse, my right shoulder would hurt. So I looked good
mhm,
and I didn't hurt all the time anymore, which was a huge blessing. But I was in my early 30s and I still couldn't do very much in my daily life. And
mm,
so then I was using the Feldenkrais method to see if I could sort of untangle some quirky underlying habits that were producing tension and producing vulnerabilities.
mm. So you very kindly pronounced the Feldenkrais. I'm trying to say it correctly. I got a little bit primed on how to say it before the show. So is it similar to yoga, or is it completely different? Because as I say, I've never heard of it before at all. So I'm really intrigued as to what it is.
Feldenkrais is the last name of a man, Moshe Feldenkrais, and he had an injury playing what we would call soccer, what you would call football,
Mhm,
as a young man, and it never really quite healed. And
mhm,
in during World War II, he was actually working with the Royal Navy, and he was out on ships a lot, and it really re-aggravated that vulnerability in his knee. And so he was in chronic knee pain, and the hard thing for him about that was he was living, I think, in a fourth floor walk up apartment. So he needed functional knees just to, get home and then get up and get out into the world in the morning. And he went to the doctors and they said, well, we'll do surgery. And there's a 50% chance you'll be fine and a 50% chance you'll walk with a cane for the rest of your life.
mhm,
And Moshe Feldenkrais was one of the first Europeans to get a black belt in judo. He said, well, first of all, 50-50 is like flipping a coin. You don't know anything.
mm,
And secondly, the prospect of going from being this really capable athlete to walking with a cane the rest of his life, if he was going to flip a coin, he didn't want those to be the only two options. So
yes.
his wife was a pediatrician, so he studied her anatomy books, and he was trained as an engineer and in physics. And so he started also studying how young children learn to move, right? How do they first start kind of mapping where their body parts are and how to coordinate them? And so he gradually worked with himself and tried different movements and noticed how he felt right away. And half an hour later and an hour after that, his knee never really healed. One of my trainers said that Moshe put my trainer's hand on his knee and you could move the patella all around. It wasn't stable, but he learned how to organize himself so that even with that structural weakness, he was able to move without pain and really do a lot, move around in the world, teach, do a lot of things. And then it was other people that he worked with that noticed, oh, you're not limping anymore. Could you work with my wife or my cousin, or could you help me? And so he began developing a method for improving how the brain and how the nervous system communicates, how the brain and the muscles talk to each other.
Mhm.
And there are several wonderful things about the Feldenkrais method. One of the ways that he helps improve that communication is, so some of the work is done hands-on, which is lovely, right? You sit or you lie down on the table, and then the practitioner helps guide your body parts through movements that kind of wake up your brain about, oh, my shoulder can move in that way, or oh, there's a relationship between these parts. One of the ideas is, if you imagine that in the motor cortex part of your brain, there's a map of all the cells in your body. It's possible that your map didn't get completely filled in
Mhm.
ever. And it's also possible that it got filled in and then maybe somebody spilled coffee on it. And that could be a stroke. It could be not using certain body parts or movements for a long time. It could be an accident, something like I had. And so looking at how do you fill in that map again?
Mhm.
And one way that Moshe did this is by giving people constraints. So in a group class, which is the other option, he would talk you through movements, which is a little bit similar to yoga, right? A room full of people and the teacher's giving you directions of physical movements. But he'd say, okay, do this, but don't lift this foot off the floor, or don't let your shoulder move. So how are you going to move the rest of you around that part? And what's wonderful about that approach is that you voluntarily take on a constraint, and then you find what options do you have with that constraint. And that's a lovely practice, because human life is facing a series of limitations or constraints. It could be your budget, it
Mhm.
could be your energy levels, it could be how many hours there are in the day. And then instead of lamenting or wishing your constraints away, well, what can you creatively do within the context of these constraints? And so if the constraint takes away your habitual way of moving your arm, for example, then you're required to find different options.
Mhm.
And sometimes in those different options, you find something that works so much better.
Mhm.
And just requires you to mobilize yourself in different ways so that you don't get stuck in a rut of, oh, this is how I always do things. Okay, but how you always do things is part of why you hurt. So what if we get you doing things in a slightly different way?
Mhm. Yeah, and I see the parallels in that, and that's interesting because pretty much all of the guests that I've had so far, I'm like, oh, it's just like weight loss. And I think, like I say, there's certain themes that run through what we do as coaches, facilitators, healers, specialists, etc. Is this that sort of that problem solving sort of route, isn't it? Like I say, not getting stuck and not just doing things because we've always done them. And I work a lot with beliefs, and again, I do belief coding, which also can work on pain, and it would be a similar kind of thing. Like I say, it's about trying to find a way around and rewire the brain, isn't it? And so it's really fascinating what you were saying there, and a different method for doing that. So I like
So
that.
one thing that Moshe Feldenkrais said that's so nice too is that he was using physical movement as a medium. It wasn't really the end goal. And what he said specifically was, I'm after flexible minds, not
Mm,
flexible bodies. And he found it useful to look at physical movement as a way to connect with someone, because first of all, pain is real. Like if you hurt, you know it,
mhm,
you really want to get out of it. But also, if you go into things that people have really built some of their identity on, like their religious beliefs, their political beliefs, you might encounter much more automatic resistance there.
mhm,
And if you simply ask them to try out different movements and then notice, how's your breathing when you do it this way compared to that way? Or
mhm,
what are your tension levels like? Or is one easier than another? you can kind of get in under the radar a little bit and get people willing to say, oh yeah, actually this is different than what I usually do, but my breathing is just fine, right? Or, oh, I don't feel all that tension in my joints here. And so you help people cultivate a relationship with themselves, right? Are they even able to pay attention to their experience, which is not a given. A lot of people really don't notice their body until it's in pain. Those more subtle levels of experience, which is really quality, right? Going from good to not so good to not really very good at all to, oh no, to, oh, now I hurt, right? A lot of folks don't really tune into those in between channels. They just, nothing's bothering me, or I'm in pain. And so getting them to even just have access to awareness of how they're feeling, of what's going on, is a really big thing. And that's so sweet. Sometimes I'll be teaching a class, and it's usually not a regular, it's one of the newer students will say, I feel something. That's wonderful. Could you be any more specific about it?
Yeah. And I think that's interesting, and because again, I work on intuitive eating. So we use, for example, what we call the hunger scale, or a physical satisfaction scale, because again, and before I did any of that work, I didn't have any awareness about my body from a food perspective either. I just thought that, in fact, I didn't even necessarily register whether I was really hungry or full, because I just had such an automatic habit of eating by the clock or eating on car journeys. So there's all these sort of habits and beliefs that were underpinning everything with regards to my relationship with food. And so I can very much see how, like you say, we have a lot of beliefs around health and pain even, isn't it? So I come from a family where your arms practically got to be hanging off before you go to the doctor, and you make do and mend, and you work through your pain and all this kind of thing. But actually, like you say, that's then you're not really necessarily listening and in alignment with body, mind and spirit. And that's where we very much are aligned, isn't it? That we work holistically on all of those elements.
I just want to jump in here for a moment with something about eating, because I introduced a constraint into my eating last spring, which was no snacking. And I was so surprised when I instituted a no snacking rule at how often I had an inclination to reach for food that had nothing to do with hunger, right? I'd be working on some tech thing on the computer and it'd be frustrating, and I'm frustrated, I want a snack. I was like, wait a minute, how does frustration with the computer equal ingesting food? Or I'm bored, or I just finished one project, I have a little bit of time before the next one, I'll have something to eat as a sort of break. Like, well, why don't we go for a walk around the block, right? There are lots of ways that I could take a break, or I could release frustration, or I could relieve boredom that didn't have to be eating. And yet eating was one of my go-tos. And so instituting that constraint of no snacking made me realize, oh, my habitual inclination in these moments is to reach for food, and maybe it would be good for me to have a few other options.
And that's very much like saying this, and that's very much in alignment with what you will do on the pain side of it, isn't it? It's like you say, it's looking for that flexibility, recognizing. So my thing is the AAA way. So it's about getting awareness, then you can step into action and then hold yourself accountable. And pretty much with each of those things, and I think you can pretty do anything you want or need to, because like with you with the pain and the body movement, it's just getting that awareness about yourself that you never had before. And it's surprising how we go around day to day not really knowing how we tick. I literally spent 40 years of my life not knowing how I worked, mind, body or soul. And it's been a real eye-opener. But sometimes it does take that journey, isn't it? And you see a lot of people who come through adversity, such as a health condition, who then do go on to help other people. Same with me. I went through my weight loss journey. I'm like, everybody's got to know about this. And so I absolutely love that, and how, like say, your personal journey is now leading to you helping others as well.
So it does a couple of things. One is Another piece that I really got from the Feldenkrais method is Moshe was giving a lecture one time, and someone in the group asked him, "What is the essential feature of being human?"
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "It's free will.
Mm-hmm.
We are the beings who get to make choices." And also that it requires three options at least to be in the realm of human choice. If you only have two, you've got a dilemma, right? Like to be or not to be. But you want to be this way or that way or some other way altogether. And so I find so then the recommendation for movement is, well, you should be striving to always be a choice. So instead of just throwing yourself onto the sofa at any moment that you're going down, you should be able to turn that back around and stand back up. Or you're sitting down, you don't just launch yourself up to standing. You're at every moment, you're in a choice point, and you could reverse or you could change your mind and do something different.
Mm-hmm.
And so, one way then for evaluating movements, right? Because that's so important a piece about making change or, living a life with dignity is, how do you evaluate your options?
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of us, until we've been through something that gets our attention, will tend to accept the evaluations of what we've been, taught as we were growing up. But really, what are your priorities? Because then what you choose will change depending on. So, for example, with eating, right? You could make your priority what will make my tongue happy right now, or you could make your priority what will not make me sluggish or give me a stomach ache or a headache later. And so those are different ways to evaluate. And so then in other areas of my life, before I make a decision, I want to have at least three options on the table. And if you can get to three, you can usually get to 4, 5, 6, right? Like things open up for you. So it's not just, do I go or not, but, well, what would I like to do this evening or the weekend? And how many different appealing options are there?
Mm-hmm.
And getting people to see that they have choices, even within their constraints, really gives them back a sense of agency and empowerment. And
Mm-hmm.
that was another thing that Moshe Feldenkrais emphasizes, that as you cultivate free will, you really increase your human dignity.
Mm-hmm.
And, it can be spontaneous and playful, but it's really a difference. Are you the victim of what happened to you? Or a lot of people feel like their body lets them down or is attacking them, which never happens. And so to reframe that into, well, what choices am I making in this moment every day, and what other options do I have, really helps them, like step back into their proper role, which is the hero of their own life adventure. And some of that, like you said, could be just simply getting to know themselves. Well,
Yeah.
I've been on autopilot for so long, I don't actually know
Mm-hmm.
who
Yeah.
I am, what I'm really here to do.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And like say, looking at options, I mean, again, the parallels always just strike me with it, that because my thing is weight loss with love, so it's about not restricting yourself. It is about making choices that you want to make, and then looking to stretch those in little micro stretches. So again, it's a very similar method, but obviously food related rather than movement and pain related. And yeah, I just find it that I find that absolutely fascinating, that we can talk about completely different things but come at it, it's amazing.
And when you're doing that, when you're looking at small changes, when you're looking at different options, it can be so gentle, right? It can be
Mm,
really working with your body as a friendly partner
yeah.
instead of as an object that you manipulate or control or
Mm,
perfect. And it can be very gentle. And
mm,
one of the things, again, in the Feldenkrais method is we're always looking at, well, how could you do this with less effort?
mm-hmm.
Right? Because if you think about it, would you want a car that requires more or less gas to cover the same distance?
Yeah. Yeah.
And why would you want to have habits that require you to expend more effort rather than less in your daily life? So, what if you could empty the dishes and get yourself to work and all that and still have enough energy and enthusiasm to go for a walk at the end of the day, or play with your dog or your
Mm,
kids, or contribute to your neighborhood, right? So reducing the amount of effort is just looking at how can you make yourself more efficient so that you can have capacity for more things that you'd like to do.
Yeah. And I'll always say about aiming to be the tortoise, not the hare, with that parable, because often we go at things again as human beings. We wanted whatever it was that we wanted it yesterday. So again, people will say, right, okay, that's it, I'm going to the gym 5 days next week, I'm going cardio, or if they're perhaps trying to heal, it's like, right, I'm going to the physio and I'm going to get them to do me a ton of exercises to do. But actually it's got to be sustainable, hasn't it? Like saying, if you're living with limitations, and I think we all, whether it be physical limitations or like say limiting beliefs or limiting habits that are holding us back, like you said, if we don't go at it gently and with love and kindness and respect for ourselves, we won't sustain it and we won't build that momentum, and then we end up quitting on ourselves. And that's why again I'd always much rather be the tortoise rather than the hare, because at the end of the day the tortoise won out whereas the hare burns out.
It's also, I think, a more respectful way to work with yourself, to accept that, okay, there are some things that I'd like to change now. However, at some point in my history, that was probably a very good decision to get me through. So, for example, someone who gets an injury to their foot, they step on a piece of glass, they sprain their ankle, something happens. Now they might limp for a while until the foot heals, but then have they now developed a habit of limping? And so even though the foot has healed, they're still not fully putting weight on it. They're still not really trusting that side. And if they keep going forward like that, then that's going to cause problems for the hips, for the shoulders, for the spine, the neck, right? They'll get into, like, it'll now become a new trouble. But it wasn't a bad decision to limp in the first place, because there was an injury to accommodate. So you can let go of a lot of the judgment, right? There's no need to feel shame for having gotten into a set of habits or having made a decision at one point. At one point, it might have been a very good option given the situation. And then the question is, are you a being of free will who can make new choices today, or are you a robot running a program? And so if you'd like to make some new choices, you can be respectful of yourself who previously made that choice, and you don't need to have judgment about that choice. You can just say, well, now I'm going to start doing things a little bit differently. And to be gentle around that, one of my trainers said that habits are a little bit like planets. They have their own sort of gravitational pull, and you just need to get close enough and you get sucked in. So some of it might be, for example, with food, making sure that there's enough healthy groceries in the house, or enough vegetables that are already washed and chopped up, so that making a good choice for your next meal is you've already set that in motion to be an easier choice, right? You're not faced with a cupboard with chips and nothing else, and so you have to go out to the store to bring something else in. No, you set things in motion so that a healthier choice will be a little bit easier to make when you get to the next decision point.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I don't know how you are for time as well, Paula, by the way. You didn't set that. Because again, I could talk for hours, so you really must nudge me if you're stuck for time. But
no, I was excited with our exchange over Messenger. I thought, oh, this will be a fabulous conversation.
Absolutely. And so I think what's really hitting home for me as well is again this free will side of it, and the empowerment that you're going that we feel from discovering that we actually have this. Like I say, I was stuck in Groundhog Day for 40 years and I thought that was life, and then I realized that actually I had the power to make different choices for myself, like you said, and to find easier choices, and to present myself with options, and to become the detective effectively of my life and weight loss. And then it's changed everything. And so empowerment, like I say, is the cornerstone, I think, of what you do, and it's the cornerstone of what you do, which is why again I couldn't wait to have this conversation, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where the game is. And I think that's also, Really the journey into adulthood is
Mm.
there are some things about being a child where it's good that you have other people that put some constraints on, because you only have to look at young children and know the first chance they get, they'll run out in traffic or,
Mhm.
stab themselves with scissors. Like all kinds of horrible things can happen. So you
Mhm.
need people looking out for you, putting some limitations on your behavior when you're young. But I think it's the journey into adulthood to say, oh, actually, nobody knows better than me
Mm.
who I am or what I am properly meant to do with my life. And
Mm.
so I need to get the information and skills that I need, and I need to make choices. And I think it's that journey into adulthood to realize I'm the one who chooses. I shape my life.
Mhm.
And that happens in every area, right? From what
Yeah.
you eat to how you move to who you associate with, what work you do, what clothes you wear. There are all sorts of opportunities to implement choice. I did a handwriting course years ago. I was just working from a book and some cards, and the woman who created it has the idea that there is a study, and I'm missing the words right now. Graphology, I think, is where you can look at
Mm.
someone's handwriting and say, oh, you have a great sense of humor in a messy house, right? And she thinks of hers more as graphotherapy, because you can change
Mm.
aspects of your life by changing the shape of the letters that you write. So I was curious and I started playing with it, and it was so humbling. I could look at the shape of the letter and then I could try to copy it and fail completely for repetition after repetition after repetition. But as I kept playing at it, I gradually got better. And I have, like, there were a couple of birthday cards that I sent that in the early days that kind of looked like a drunken 7-year old had written them out. They were all over the place. But what I found very interesting is I'd kept a journal for years, and the content of what I wrote started changing as the shape of the letters changed.
Mm.
And
Interesting.
even now, years later, I just feel a real sense of pleasure when I look at my handwriting now, because it's different than it was. And I deliberately made that change. And it's a very attractive script and it's very
Mhm.
legible, all that. But what shape did I give to letters was something I hadn't put any conscious thought in since seventh grade, when I was
Mhm.
7 years old and learning how to, write cursive,
Mhm.
not just print anymore. And so that kind of was due for a reevaluation. Well, how
Mhm.
do I do this? So you can enter in from anywhere, right?
Mhm.
Clothing style, how you clean your house. There are so many entry points because you have to eat every day. Your relationship with food is a very good one to look at, because you have to move to breathe.
Mhm.
Your How you move in the world is another good basic one to just give a little attention to, and see if you put a little intention into it, to how you make your choices and what you choose to do, what results do you get in your life? And
Mm.
you might have some very pleasant surprises.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I always describe it as taking unfettered ownership for yourself.
Right.
And like I say, it's that is where the true power kind of comes from, is knowing that, say, you can find your purpose, control your destiny effectively with just some changes. And like you say, just starting on some kind of journey, even if it was that handwriting journey, to just learn those things. And I'm pretty sure that was my script that she gave you, actually, the messy house and me all over that one. But it's
Mine too.
interesting. Yeah, but it's interesting because as well, I journal as part of it, and I'm thinking about my own journals now, and how, sometimes I'll journal in the morning, and sometimes I'm like, I'm rushing just to try and get something out, so I'm not blessed with amazing script, but it changes with how busy I'm feeling. And so that's actually quite an interesting thing to note. And I think I'll probably be clocking more actually about how I write, and the pace and the speed and kind of how I'm feeling when I'm doing that as well.
And this program wasn't so much about neat or
Mm.
hurried or how much time you're taking. It was about the shapes, right? So she
Mm.
says, for example, that the cross on the T is sort of where are you setting the bar for your life? So do you set a low bar or do you cross right at the top?
Mm.
There are some letters that you could make like an O, you could make it in a circle so that you're ready to just move on to the next letter, or you could make it the other way so that you have to kind of stop and go to the next. So, are you creating your letters in a direction so that you flow easily into the next activity that you're doing? Right.
Mm.
So there were some of those decisions. And do
Mm.
you put extra little loops in things, or do you just make that clean, simple shape and move on to the next one? So it was that sort of
Mm.
investigation.
Yeah, and I can certainly see some metaphors in the letter generation as well, which again is would be interesting to explore. Slightly off piste, but
Well,
fascinating.
and
Really.
what I do, and I didn't have any intention necessarily of bringing this up,
Yeah.
but what I just love is the idea, and I think I shared that a little bit in response to something you said, which is you can start taking ownership for your life in any area, right?
Mm.
Making choices. It's about making choices, but I think one choice you also have to make is, well, what are your priorities, right?
Mm.
Because if you don't take ownership of that piece,
Yeah.
then you haven't really stepped into your own either. But I
Yeah.
do think it's that I don't regret getting on that bus, right?
Mm.
Like I hurt for a long time, but I love what I do now.
Mm.
And I was not on track for this.
Yeah.
And I love that I get to meet other people in their real tender moments of vulnerability, like, oh, I might never be able to ride a bicycle for the rest of my life,
Mm.
or, oh, I can't get up, or, oh, I hurt all the time. And very often, a lot can be turned around, and quite often without a huge investment of time or effort. And I get to be part of that turnaround. So when I talk to other people about, well, I work with people who have chronic pain, they kind of feel like, oh, that must be a depressing. And I get to be part of turning the ship around, right? I
Mm.
get to be part of their life getting better again. And sometimes when they had even given up on that. So I
Mm.
had one woman come to me. She was teary. She joined an 8-week walking class. This was before the pandemic, so we were still meeting in person. And she'd had stomach surgery because she was trying to lose weight, and she had successfully lost a lot of weight. So she was happy with that. And her doctor wanted her to walk to keep off the weight. But she'd gotten to this point of, when I walk, everything hurts, my ankles, my knees, my hips, my back. And she was afraid that she was caught in that dilemma, right? I can either not walk and I might gain back all that weight that I worked so hard to lose, or I can make myself walk through the pain and maybe I ruin my joints and now I have chronic pain for the rest of my life.
Mm.
Well, that's a miserable place to be, right? So she joined the walking class and I said, just give me 4 weeks. Don't go on bed rest, but don't do any extra exercise. Just come to class and go about your daily life. And we just looked at things about how do you roll through the foot and how do you align the knees with the toes, right? Little things. She came to class for 1 hour a week, and it only took 3 weeks. She danced into the room the night of the fourth class and said, I went for a 2-hour walk yesterday and nothing hurt.
It's amazing.
And and so I think too, a lot of folks that are in that kind of situation, they get judged by other people. Oh, you're just lazy. You should get out and walk more. Well, a lot of people exercise their way into chronic pain, right? So
Mm.
what do you do if you feel like you're on the cusp of that? And
Mhm.
someone else had multiple sclerosis, and she had pain just going up and down a flight of stairs, walking across the street. She was in a really tough spot. She came to some weekly classes for a while and then she disappeared. And I saw her, I don't know, about 7, 8 months later, she signed up for another class. And I said, where have you been? She said, I went on a round the world trip for 6 months. And her favorite place had been a temple complex in Cambodia that had all kinds of steps in it. And she said, you know what? I got off the bus at every stop. Not everybody did. I was a little bit slow, but I got out and saw everything. And so here was someone who had trouble moving around in her own house, moving around in her own city, and it opened her up, right? Just these small, gentle movements, pay attention to yourself, that something like an around the world trip was an option for her. So so I get to be part of that, right? From the coming to
That's
what's
amazing.
not working to, well, let's see what's possible.
Yeah, and sometimes I say we like you say, sort of that victimhood that we can sometimes have, and I know victimhood can be a bit of a triggering word, and say again, we might judge ourselves. We wouldn't necessarily want to admit that we're in that, and again, sometimes we know we're in it, sometimes we don't know we're in it, but that's powerful, because like I say, it's opening opportunities, isn't it, by rather than, because again, our brains do work with black and white thinking, isn't it? It's this or it's that, and it's how our brains work. And I say, just giving a few more choices. Say you literally opened that lady's world.
And it can be tough. I don't want to minimize, oh, well, then just try something else, right? So it was 10 years of me trying something before I got out of pain. And then I don't share, I'm starting to now a little bit, but I don't share this story so much yet, because I haven't completed that nice narrative arc yet. But I've been having fatigue, digestion, health issues since 2006. What I'm coming to find out now is it's mold exposure. And none of the many practitioners I've spent tens of thousands of dollars with over the years have looked into my environment. So they've had me try a whole bunch of things. And I've been feeling like, oh, nothing works. Maybe I'll never get well. And I'm just starting to see that turn around now as I'm making some changes in the house and making some changes in supplements and things I'm taking to support me in the face of what's actually going on. So you absolutely have to identify what's the problem you need to solve. And sometimes the professionals will help and sometimes they won't, right? So it can be tough and frustrating. I mean, I would love to have been the one traveling and doing a whole bunch of things in the last, 15, 16, 18 years. And I've been facing the constraint of, oh, that would just wipe me out, right? Like, I'm tired just thinking about packing and getting myself to that destination, let alone doing all those things. And yet I'm someone who used to, you know, live overseas, and I played music on street corners. I went all around. So I have it in my personality and my inclination. And then I've been in my own other hard place recently. And you just have to keep looking at it from different angles as your stamina permits, as your finances permit, as your patience permits. There definitely have been times when I'm like, well, I'm taking a break from trying to solve this because I don't seem to be making any progress. So if you know somebody who's in a hard place, don't crack the whip and tell them, well, you just need to start looking, because they might be exhausted from having been doing just that. But I think if you keep at it and you keep looking for resources and you keep looking for different ways, right? You don't just keep going to the same kind of health professional but I've been looking from nutritional angles, from diagnostic angles, from all sorts of different, from what are the dynamics in my family? What are my limiting beliefs? All kinds of stuff. And I'm now just beginning to piece together, oh, my house gives me shelter from the rain and the cold, and I can lock the doors and keep evil people out. And yet there are little microorganisms in the house that are making me sick. So how do I improve the environment in which I live so that I can get back to more vitality, more vibrancy, more being able to get out and play and have fun in the world? So people can be in a really hard place, and it's not your business to push them. And it's your business just to, I think, offer to connect and allow them to share as much as they want, and also sometimes give them a break from the hard thing, talk about
and give ourselves a break from the hard thing as well, isn't it? Like and you're absolutely right, because we can only ever act whatever it is that we're trying to work on, we can only really act when we're ready to. Like I say, nobody can force anybody to do anything, and we can't even force ourselves. Because if we did, if we were able to crack the whip on ourselves, we would all, but that's, again, that's not sustainable, and that's the thing. Yeah.
And some things I think just take a long time, and I'm trying right now, because I've been grieving a bit, right? How long my life has been compromised by this, and I'm trying to see this also as the part of the adventure of my life. And what am I going to do with this? I don't regret the accident, because look where it has taken me.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Being able to
now
see
I'm
it as a gift is powerful as well, isn't it? Like you say.
now I'm trying to look at the mold situation and have a little eager anticipation for, okay, well, what does this hard chapter make possible for me next? What will I be able to do, or who will I be able to connect with and help that maybe wouldn't have been possible if I hadn't had this? And I think too, it's just so countercultural. Some things take a long time to resolve. And if you watch TV or movies, they absolutely don't prepare you for that, right? Someone can be traumatized or in a serious accident or a bad illness, and it'll just last a couple of scenes as long as it's convenient for the script writers. And then it's all over. And they usually have no residual trouble. They don't have to go to PT or occupational therapy. They don't need help. They're just bounce back to normal. And that's not what happens in the real world with real bodies and real lives. Things can take sometimes a long time to really play out and come to resolution.
Yeah. And dealing with the frustration of that. So because, like you're saying, certainly when we work on weight loss, there can be a lot of 2 steps forward and 1 step back, or sometimes 1 step forward and 3 back, and like you say, peaks and troughs where you can face doing stuff and not doing stuff. And yeah, so I again, I really resonate with that message. But again, being gentle with yourself, and one of my mentors says that it is all part of the healing journey, and as coaches will say that we grow through what we go through, or you fail forward, or whatever it is. But it's so true. And again, once I embraced that personally as well, and let go of perfectionism, because I was a huge perfectionist, and like say, somebody who felt like everything should be perfect, whether that be my weight loss, my career, whatever it might be. Whereas now I'm embracing the messy, and like say, seeing that as part of life. And actually on my email sign off, it says coach, podcaster, and human.
Nice.
Is that actually it's okay to be human. It's okay to, whether it be the more cliched, it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to go backwards, and it's okay to spurt forwards. It was just kind of that acceptance of where I am without that judgment. But then, like you say, stepping back into decision making, to saying, okay, well, is this where I want to be, or do I want to move forward? Do I want to do something different?
I think too, what's important is to realize that, in the hero's journey, or any story that's worth reading, any movie that's worth going to, things aren't wonderful all the time, right? What makes the good bits really satisfying is that there is a really serious challenge or some significant obstacle to overcome. And so, believe me, I'm still working on this in my own life, but to see that nobody's promised to be on vacation for a whole lifetime, right? You don't just get to go from one beautiful spot to the next and have people wait on you and say, oh, that's fun. You could, but it's not interesting, and it's really sort of an infant way to live a life. But having something hard to work on and finding your way through that challenge, hopefully with some grace and kindness, that's a real hero's journey right there, even if it doesn't look exciting. One of the things I love about teaching yoga classes is how beautiful it is to see someone in integrity with themselves. It's not necessarily the deepest pose, but when you see that they're right with the line of gravity, they're respecting their own joints and tissues, and there's a real coherence to how everything has come together, it can just be stunning. And that won't necessarily get on the cover of a yoga calendar, because it's not impressive to someone who doesn't know what they're looking at. But there's something beautiful about living in integrity, having some coherence to who you are and how you behave in the world. And if you think that you need to have a bigger, more exciting adventure, you'll sell yourself short and you'll actually miss your life. There can be the adventure of who you are and how you make your way in the world, which could be the path of family, which could be caring for pets, which could be, for me right now, cleaning up my house because it's making me sick. So there's your human adventure and where you're stepping into full adulthood and your exciting life goes won't necessarily look like a blockbuster movie, but can have tremendous value and satisfaction in it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Beautiful. So I'm conscious of time. It has been fantastic. Like with everybody, I literally could talk for hours, but we do need to probably start to wind down. Now, you are going to gift the lovely listeners and watchers a little prezi, I believe. Do you want to just tell them what that is?
So I have a series of 3-minute videos that are called Pain-Free Workday, and each video has one practical tip for something you can implement while you're working. It's not about carving extra time out of your day, but an adjustment you can make to your workstation or a small adjustment you can make to your own posture that will set you up to be more comfortable while you're working so that you can be more productive and focus on your work and hopefully more efficient, so that at the end of the day, you're less tired and you might feel in the mood to go out and play or go for a walk or just not need to recover from your workday. So the present for all the listeners is the access to the Pain-Free Workday video series.
Beautiful.
And if I can, I know podcasts are a little more evergreen and the giveaway bundle is short, but what I've done there, what I'm offering as part of that bundle is a presentation called Body Language of Leadership. What I find with a lot of the older women that I know and that I have the opportunity to ask questions and listen to is that a lot of them feel like they often get dismissed or disregarded, that they've reached a certain age where they don't quite register as someone to respect or consult, but just somebody to take care of or manage or disregard. And so the body language of leadership is just small adjustments that you can make that help you show up with a little more presence so that maybe you'll be seen in a different way, so that maybe what you have to say can be heard.
They both sound absolutely amazing. So I will get Paula to drop her links under the live videos that we're recording today. And then when they go live on YouTube and in the podcast, I'll make sure that I grab them and put them there as well as in the Wellness for Women membership where they can live for all time. So that's absolutely amazing. So it's been absolutely a pleasure to have you, Paula. Thank you very much for joining us today. And Paula will drop her links as well. So if anybody wants to connect with her, then please do so. But other than that, we will love you and leave you for today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your evenings.
Thank you, Faye. This has been a delightful conversation. I really love spending some time with you.
It has, and yes, indeed, same with you. And we'll say goodbye for now. So okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening, and don't forget, if you want to boost your life and weight loss the AAA way, check out the relevant links for today's show in the description. Speak soon.